Ka pai. E kore au e ngaro, he kākono a hau I roia mai I rangi Aotea. Kia ora tātou katoa. Ko rangi nui e tui honei, ko papatua nuku e takoto nei, tēnā kōrua. Ki te kingi Māori, pai mārire. Ki te hunga mate, haere, haere, haere atu rā. Ki te hunga ora, tēnā tātou katoa. Ko mere ana te pere tōku ingoa, nau mai haere mai ki tēnei wānanga. Kia ora and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today and welcome to our webinar, Exploring How Te Tiriti Can Strengthen Health Promotion Competency. My name is Miriana Te Pere. I'm the Māori Health Promotion Strategist here at HPF. Just before we get into our kaupapa, I'll just remind you of some of our housekeeping. If you weren't sure, our webinar will be recorded and we will ask for your beautiful face and a photo at the end, so please don't be shy. Please remember to mute and unvideo your camera. There may be times we will get you to participate in some discussions. At those times, we would love to hear your kōrero and see your face. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to put them in the chat. Our lovely aunties, Emma and Lavinia, will come back to those when we can, when it's time to ask those questions. And also, I'm pretty sure all of you got sent the Geneva Charter and Wairua Indigenous Peoples Statement. So if you got a chance to read that, cool. We will be touching on those throughout this session as well. So that is us. I think that's everything. Yes, Emma?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so back to our kaupapa. Exploring how Te Tiriti can strengthen health promotion competency. So what we're really trying to do, whānau, is really create a social movement. If you've been living under a rock, or unless you've been living under a rock, you should know by now that Māori health is being prioritised and included in a lot of main key discussions. Also, what's happening is there's a big push to go from individual to collective and family health approaches to health. And there's a lot of inclusion of Māori and other cultural practices and knowledge are now being weaved through many of the organisations throughout Aotearoa. So why we do this? Of course, Te Tiriti o Waitangi, this formalises the basis of the relationship between Māori and the Crown. But how we do it, we can also use Te Tiriti as a tool, as a framework as well. So we will touch on some of those today. So how you can do this properly or competently. Also, we are looking at the international perspective. So why should we care what's happening around the world? You know, as my auntie would say, shouldn't we worry about our own whare before we start looking at someone else's? So we have our own issues to concentrate here in Aotearoa. Surely that should be our focus. And yes, that's true. I would say to my auntie, yes, that is true. But if you look around the world, our planet is dying. We share this one planet, so we must have a global village approach. And Aotearoa, in terms of health promotion, Aotearoa are leaders of Indigenous health promotion practices. So we have a lot of valuable knowledge and practices to share. We could be the trailblazers for this stuff. So we are going to talk about that stuff as well. When I say we, I mean Sione and Viliami, the very, very amazing leaders that we have here at Health Promotion Forum. So moving on to our first speaker. If you didn't know him, now you know. He is the newly elected president of the International Union for Health Promotion and Education. He is, of course, our executive director for HPF. He is a research fellow with Otago University. He is a member of the global think tank with UNICEF. And he is just a genuine, kind, caring, and hardworking person. So kia ora mai tātou. Kia ora, tēnā koe, Sione.
Tēnā koe, Mirana. Thank you for that very kind introduction. In addition to what you said, one of the roles I really love these days is that I'm a wonderful grandpa. That is what my grandchildren tell me. I don't know whether they just want to sweeten me up so I can give them all the things their parents do not want me to give them. But I love my grandchildren, and they are actually one of the sources of inspiration for what I'm doing. Firstly, It's an honor to be with you because you are why we are doing what we are doing. And we are doing this on our behalf, not only the members of the forum, but also the health promotion workforce, and broadly also for Aotearoa, New Zealand. We are serving our health promotion community, our members, the broader public health, and it's part of our contribution to the collective well-being of our nation, of our Pacific region, and our one small spaceship called Planet Earth, the Whenua, the Whanua. Since we prepared this webshop, as Mirjana has outlined, a few things have changed rather rapidly. And so we have tweaked slightly what we are going to talk about today. And Emma, if I may ask you to post on the chat my contents of my talk, and that's the framework of our conversation, the outline of our conversation for today. And as Viryami has rightly said, this should be regarded as the first of a number of conversations with you about our collective journey as the membership of the Health Promotion Forum, but also the broader health promotion community, and how we can make a collective impact. As Mirjana said, we are in this together. So I will touch first on the story of IUHPE and HPF. And then secondly, we will look at the exercise that we ask you to do. For that task, we gave you, as Mirjana said, two statements: the Geneva Charter for Wellbeing and the Waiora Indigenous Peoples Statement. And we did ask you to identify how many times planetary health is mentioned, how many times Indigenous knowledge is mentioned, as well as Indigenous leadership. And off the top of my head, I recall that we also asked you to see whether spirituality, the spiritual dimension of well-being, is mentioned in those two documents. As you might have gathered already, the idea is for us to really understand these key documents that are policy statements and key references for the thinking of WHO, for the thinking of IUHPE, and others at the international level, and also at the national level, whether universities, the Ministry of Health, and other agencies who will look for guidance on how to move forward using health promotion as a platform, as a tool to advance and address the inequities that we face and the ecological determinants of health that we are actually experiencing here in Aotearoa and the rest of the world. And so after that exercise, I will invite Viryami to give us the bigger picture, and that is the regional picture, the Pacific region. And one of the reasons why we are doing that is for us to actually honor our constitution. Our mandate from our constitution says that we serve Aotearoa, serve the Pacific region, and serve the international community. And that's why we are doing what we are doing, not only to fulfill the objects of our constitution, but more importantly, to serve our members who have so faithfully, loyally support us over the last 30 plus years that the health promotion was formally put together in 1988. But in fact, as you might know, we were put together in a few years before we legally constituted a health promotion forum. And then after Viryami, we might have some Q&As around that. We will touch on the very essence of what we are going to talk about today. But I think given the time frame that we are looking at, I think we will touch on that just to give us a sense of what is the journey, or what has been the journey like, where are we now, and looking into the future. Just to say at this point that the accreditation framework will ensure the quality of the competencies of health promoters across the country. It will also help with employers and setting standards, whether it's remunerations or whether it's promotion and all of that. but more importantly, the ongoing professional development of our workforce. Very timely to have a sense of what we are doing because of the reform that is going on as we speak, and how we might work together to move forward together and make our rightful contribution to the well-being of Aotearoa, and at the same time make sure that our rights, our well-being, our professional safety and security are maintained, and ultimately, and most importantly, the well-being of the communities that we serve, are enhanced rather than harmed further. That's the outline of our conversation today, and I'll start the part one. Firstly, we gave you the story, the media release that was sent out recently, announcing that I am the new president of the International Union for Health Promotion and Education. Although that is news and important, what is more important for us as the members of HBF to understand our collective journey. Firstly, the ethos and the principles and the maxim that sets us from day one and how we approach our task and take this, what I see as the collective journey. We have been saying to ourselves and those who have been helping us with the journey that if we do the right thing, and do it the right way, with the right spirit and motive, and for the right purpose, the right outcome will come. We never dreamed that by serving our Aotearoa health promotion community and trying to contribute to the regional and international scene, that it will land HBF at this point in time to contribute its leadership at the international level. Because as you know, IUHPE is 70, going 71 this year as we speak, is not only the oldest international NGO advancing and leading health promotion, but it is also working very closely in partnership with other international development partners like the World Health Organization, and now the emerging planetary-based health promotion and public health institutions, agencies, and networks like the Planetary Health Alliance that is driven out of New York and other parts of Europe, and so on and so forth. And so we walk together so that we can walk far. And we do this from a place, a spirit of love, justice, courage, and humility for the well-being of all. And the well-being of all means Aotearoa, the Pacific, and our international community. The journey for me started when I went to Vancouver 2007 for the IHP conference. I went with Dr. Alison Blakelock. Some of you might recall Alison, a wonderful leader in our health promotion space, former executive director of the Health Promotion Forum. For me personally, at the time, I went to have a first-hand knowledge and experience of the plight of the Indigenous peoples of Canada. You might recall that in the same year, 2007, the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples were announced. 4 states did not ratify, and they were Aotearoa, New Zealand, Australia, United States, and Canada. These are countries where a significant number of Indigenous people live. And the second reason why I went to Canada, just to observe IUHPE and whether there is a platform that we can contribute to, and how it can contribute back to the work that we do here. And so I was beginning to be convinced, and our delegation did not have the same view. 2010, we went to the next IHPE conference that was held in Geneva. I met up with Dr. William Puloka, my counterpart, Williami there. Williami might recall that. And in 2013, I thought that I've seen IHP enough to know that it can, we can contribute, and IHP can help our situation here. So Trevor Simpson, some of you might recall, our Deputy Executive Director at the time, and Karen Hicks, who was also a workforce development health promotion strategist, they went to Pattaya in Thailand to observe for themselves. It is not enough of just one person in the team to go and come back and try to drag everyone forward. And so those two went and they saw there are opportunities there that we can contribute and we can receive some benefits back. So we put together our bid for the 2016 conference, and we won the bid to host the 2019 conference. Out of that conference that was held in Rotorua, where leaders in public health and health promotion, the like of, say, Michael Marmot and others came, there was also a delegation from the WHO. And out of the conference, two legacy statements were approved by acclamation, meaning it was unanimously accepted, not only by the over-Fransian delegates who came, but also approved by us, the Health Promotion Forum, on your behalf, and also by IFHPE. And as you have read already, those two statements, they talk to each other. And by the way, they are available online from us and from IHPE. And they highlight, among other things, indigenous knowledge as part of the solutions to our effort to, collective effort to address the well-being of the planet and the well-being of humanity. So that was 2019. We put in place a mechanism, and that was the Global Working Group on Waiora Planetary Health and Human Well-being. You note the word Waiora there. That was purposely put right at the very front to signal two things. One is the country where the conceptualization came from. That's our Aotearoa contribution. And equally important, that it is about also indigenous knowledge having a part in the equation of finding solutions for our common challenges that we are facing today. The Global Working Group has been instrumental in influencing IHPE. So I don't know whether, Emma, you may not have this document, but on the IHPE website, it is available there, the 5-year strategy of IHPE. And you can see that many of the components in the Waiora statement and the Rotorua statement are already incorporated to the 5-year strategy of IHPE. And that's the work of the Global Working Group, Waiora Working Group. Because of that work, WHO, and as I said, they were invited to the Rotorua conference, invited us last year to the December conference, the 10th Global Conference on Health Promotion of WHO, to contribute a workshop, and we did that. But also through IHPE, the Global Working Group, Waiora, was also invited to contribute. And also behind the scene, we were given the chance to not only to contribute to the Geneva Charter for Wellbeing, but also to provide some advice on other documents that help to shape up Geneva Charter. It was quite an honor and a bounty to be able to do that and contribute. And so, as you can see, and as you have read, the Geneva Charter, to some small degree, reflect quite a few significant things on our understanding here in Aotearoa, what well-being is, but also planetary health, but also, and equally, if not more important, the call for indigenous knowledge to find its rightful place within the solutions that we want to see applied around the world through the Geneva Charter. And I think the actual wording is a call for centering indigenous knowledge and leadership. At the recent conference 2022, that was last week, of the IHPE, I was invited by the WHO team to co-present with them in a workshop on the Geneva Charter. And that was the first time out into the public arena a presentation on what is the Geneva Charter and the purpose, its contents, and how we might engage around the world to look at how we can implement it. And because my view now, because we have some elements that we can contribute, we already have a sense of what we can contribute even further, and more importantly, how to apply that global framework in our context here in Aotearoa. And towards the end of the conference, I was invited by a number of my colleagues on the global executive board of the IHBE to step forward and be the next president. I at first I hesitated because I have great respect for my colleagues around the table at IHBE. But I think what is significant here is the emergence of indigenous knowledge and indigenous leadership around the world. And some of you who might have followed the public statements of the Secretary General of Guterres of the UN, he made it very clear consistently over the last 3 years that we must respect, acknowledge, and heed the knowledge and the rights and the place of indigenous peoples. So it is the right approach for the right time. And it comes not as a surprise for me that my colleagues invited me, to step forward. And I said to them when I accept the invitation, when I gave the acceptance address, that it is not about me, it is about us walking together, working together. And I also said in my closing remarks, that we cannot rest while humanity is in pain and agony, and while Mother Nature is broken, sinking, and weeping. We must walk together. We must work together. And so you see, that's the story of HBF and IUHBE, and we are there at this point on our behalf for all of you members, but also all of us health promoters in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And when you link that back to what are the co-benefits for Aotearoa, New Zealand, IUHBE has got this global framework of accreditation. It was developed and launched in around 2012, I think. I need to check that. And it was firstly around the European region. It was called then the European Accreditation Framework. And then by the time we got to the Curitiba conference in 2016, we've got enough experience around the world to evolve and elevate that to a global level. So it was announced and launched in Curitiba that it is a global framework. So what we did here in Aotearoa, New Zealand is to work with the system. At the time, I didn't have the tools and the means to put things together. But anyway, what you do as a health promoter, you advocate, and you mediate, and you enable. And as a result of that, we were able to have the IHBE approve that Aotearoa, New Zealand will have its accreditation framework very identical to the global framework. But in addition to that, we will have our unique components based on the social, political, and cultural context of New Zealand, and more significantly also that we have Te Tiriti as a strong feature of our unique components. So we are global with our global family, IHBE. At the same time, we show our unique cultural and professional identity because of the reality of our nation. So in the next 2 years, that's a big task for us, that we set up the structures, the committees, the assessment committees, the complaints committees, if there are complaints, teach how it is applied, train assessors, and away we will go. So we are looking at operationalizing this new structure in the next 2 years. As I said earlier in my talk, it will give formal recognition to our professional practice, our field of promotion. As you know, we are very vulnerable at the moment. There is no formal recognition. It is not regulated, and we are not too sure, or what is the core identity of promotion is. So this effort will move us a step forward. Formal recognition, it will help with organization planning, developing your workforce. It will ensure the quality of standard of professional, ongoing professional development of our workforce. We should be recognized more, not to be pushed around here and there. So we emerge and contribute to the reform that we are seeing. But more importantly, we contribute to the new realities that are unfolding. The convergence of ecological determinants, economic determinants, commercial determinants, pandemics, and all of that. We need to develop a workforce that is fit for purpose. And by chance or by divine, as they say, divine intervention, I happen to be leading IHBE for the next 3 years. And I'll do that, as I said before, with justice and fairness to all. It's a global organization, but our work here is rather unique. IHBE is watching very closely this space, because there are many countries, as you know, where reside at least 400 million indigenous peoples, and they have knowledge that they can contribute, for our well-being. As you know from the UN reports, 80% of our biodiversity on land are within land masses where indigenous peoples reside. And that did not happen by chance. It is because of their knowledge and their wisdom, despite the forces of bigger powers of colonization, imperialism, capitalism, and persecution, and all of that. As we speak, we know that there have been upheavals in Brazil, the Amazon, and there are many such flashpoints around the world. The plight of indigenous peoples, and those are faraway examples to illustrate that is a global phenomenon that we need to deal with. But right home here in Aotearoa, we have similar challenges to face. So where are we now? So we have a lot to contribute. We have come to a point in our social evolution as humanity. We move from the family, the tribe, the city-state, nation-state. We are now at the final stage of our journey as human family. We are a one people, one planet, one health, one world, one people, one health. And I mentioned something along that line in Rotorua. And that's the reality. And the thinking now is to elevate health promotion to that level, kind of planetary health promotion. And we learn a lot from the Matauranga of Tangata Whenua. As you know, whereas in other cultures, they see humanity is in charge and control, and therefore boss Mother Nature until it breaks. In the Matauranga of Tangata Whenua, we and the environment are inextricably one. As they say down the line, I am the river is me. And our colleagues in Geneva and Paris and Montreal, when we met, they were surprised to find that the Whanganui River, Te Uru are now legal persons. So we are ahead of the game, and thanks to indigenous knowledge. And there are some similar but small pockets around the world. So that's where we are with our journey, our collective journey. And this is our story as our health promotion family. And it's about all of us. It's the inclusive we, it's the tato, not the mato. I'll stop the yarn there and the rambling, Miranda, and I'll pause there and see if there are questions. That's part one. Thank you.
Thank you, Sione. I'd just like to invite our participants to post up any questions. We haven't had any so far, Sione. I think I was hogging the chat a little bit there. But yeah, just to remind our participants, ask now, whānau, ask now while the man is right here with us.
Yeah, let me put it this way. If you were happy with the story I told, you understand it, you know, you put a thumbs up. You know, if you were not happy, you know, put it, what do you know, those, what do you call them, Miranda? Emojis or, yeah, that's the one. That's the one, Wendy.
The reactions.
Yeah. If you're not happy, put an angry face there, so that I would like a sincere response, not a please the speaker response. Yeah. Did you scan that, Miranda, and see if people are okay with the story or whether things not clear?
Yeah, it was mostly hands up. Didn't see any. I think there's some laughing faces.
Yeah,
available.
great.
Wow faces, but none of those. All thumbs up.
Okay, great. I thought I saw you one thumbs down, but anyway, we will talk and have a chat offline after this. So hopefully you will take that series, that story into mind and heart, and we will of course offer you the, as usual, our video for your, your view before we put it up on the net for our other fellow promoters to access and our members. And thank you again for your patience on that one. Now, I have spoken for how long? Some 20 plus minutes. It's your turn to do some work. Yeah. Now, I'm asking you to put your questions on, your answers on the chat. How many times Indigenous knowledge is mentioned in the Geneva Charter? Say 1, 2, 3. And if you want to put a quote, you put, an excerpt from the charter. And as you know, the idea is to make you read the charter before you come. You know, if this is a co-learning space, not me to give a sermon and you go to sleep.
Can you repeat the question, please, Sione?
How many times is Indigenous knowledge mentioned in the Geneva Charter? Yeah, there was a longer list that I mentioned earlier. The Indigenous knowledge, spiritual well-being, Indigenous leadership, and planetary health. You got some answers there, Miranda?
Someone wrote 1.
Yeah, that's a good start, Charles.
Is there any prizes?
It's up to you, Miranda. You're the boss. You can decide whether you offer a scholarship for the next session.
Or maybe we've got 5. Someone else wrote 1. Someone said culture is acknowledged from Andre. Hope I pronounced your name right.
Yeah, one more minute, and we'll see if there are no other comments, Miranda, we can continue on to the next part. Yeah, that exercise was just to give us a break, but also to give you time to reflect on those 2 statements, but also to signal the journey, the collective journey that we have taken. I had a good conversation catching up with adjunct Professor John Rayburn, and some of you might recall Professor Rayburn contributed to the Ottawa Charter in 1986. Basically, he had the draft read out and had a read of the written draft that he got. He was not happy with that content because they were all related to policies, the 4 action strands. And so he set up burning some midnight oil and crafted the 3rd action strand of community action, community development. And he pushed it under the door of the drafting team. And lo came the next morning, a new version came out with community action, community development, almost verbatim. That's Aotearoa contribution to the Ottawa Charter. So we are rather proud of that. And you compare that to where we are with the Geneva Charter. We have contributed, not just us, but I'd say that we made some impact and help with elevating the consciousness to a more planetary level. The spiritual dimension of well-being, our global working group, we're working on that on our feedback. The acknowledgement of Indigenous knowledge and leadership. So we have followed this systematically. And those of you who are familiar, as you know, most of us are policy analysts or use policies or influence policies or help drafting policies. You have to be systematic and you have to see this as a long-term process. It's not a flash in the pan. So when we input to the Geneva Charter, we look back and we try to recall when was the first time spirituality mentioned in any of the charters since 1986. Let me put a spontaneous quiz here. Does anyone know when spirituality was mentioned? Put it on the chat. Mariana, can you check?
Yeah, I got my eye on the chat. Oh, what year?
What are the answers? I'm just making this interactive rather than a monologue. Yeah, but also to check our collective knowledge so that it is a collective journey. Yeah.
Can you say that again to me? What?
Of all the charters over the years that WHO put out, which one mentioned spirituality apart from the Geneva Charter?
I'll get back to you.
Yeah, I see some answers there, but the word spirituality was specifically mentioned in this charter. And again, I'll give you a hint. So there was the joint effort of led by Dr. Mihi Ratima, Dr. Alison Blacklock, and Professor John Rayburn. So that was the Bangkok Charter, 2005, off the top of my head. And the idea is not to catch you out, but it's actually to give you a sense of this systematic, long-term journey of commitment, of dedication for the well-being of our community here in Aotearoa, and now, take it up to the global level, because basically we are a one global village. And as you know, anything that happens at the global level, hits directly on us. Geopolitical conflicts mentioned in the Geneva Charter, environmental challenges, pandemics. And you look at what Ukraine is doing to us, the prices of goods on the shop, petrol and all of that. But Ukraine is not the only flashpoint. Think Yemen, think Afghanistan, think Tonga, where Williami just came from. Tonga has its triple whammy, volcanic eruptions, tsunami, and now we are in the same boat of COVID-19. So global challenges impacting on our global community, and we need to work together at all levels, the local, national, and international scene. And any comments or feedback, Mariana? Any questions on the chat?
No, we had some people that were unsure which document, but then you gave the answer, and Coral posted a link to the Bangkok Charter. So thank you, Coral.
So that's part 2. And at this point, I will ask Viliami to broaden up our focus in Aotearoa, although I did touch on the global level, to bring us the bigger picture of Moana Nui Akiwa and some of the challenges that you see, Viliami. And again, welcome back to Aotearoa. Welcome back home. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sione, and thank you, everyone. And if you bear with me, see if I can share my my slide here. I'm glad Sione didn't use the slides, so I can do that myself. You usually have fantastic slides to show. Mariana, am I showing my slide here? No?
Not quite, not yet. Hang on, I will.
Okay. Bear with me. I've just been back from the where civilization is.
You're still on island time.
Yeah. Okay. Someone guide me in here. Where do I say to share my slides?
Go to share screen, the green button down the bottom.
Okay. Okay, let me close this one. All right, here we go. Share screen. Okay. Share. Is that better?
Perfect.
Okay, malo lele and Nisabula Vinaka. Talafalava, kia ora, and a big Pacific greetings to all of you. Let me see, where's the show? Yes, you know, my name is Viliami Puloka. I'm a colleague of Sione and Mariana and Emma, working with Health Promotion Forum. Just flew in last night from Tonga, still a bit sleepy and cold here in Aotearoa. But nevertheless, it's great to be back and to join up with all of you. As Sione has been sharing with us, of course, one of the big purpose of this session is, of course, is finding a way where we can support the health promotion practitioners, a pathway or a career path, whereby we can enumerate them and recognize the good work that everyone has been doing in this space of health promotion. Usually in workplaces, whatever is no one has been assigned to, we say, okay, that's the health promotion people doing. We used to say in medicine that public health is a poor cousin of medicine. But I think in public health, health promotion is the poor cousin of public health, in a sense that a lot of work has been carried out by people because they don't have the opportunity to have this piece of paper or qualification, and they largely ignored or not being recognized. And one of the big reason that we are doing this, the health HBF is trying to do this is to carve out a pathway, a career path, and to recognize the good work that so many of you, so many of us have been doing in this space of health promotion. I remember I started off working as a health promoter back in Tonga many centuries ago when I started working there. And they say that health promotion is everybody's business. And, you know, it sounded great that everybody is doing it. But then I quickly realized that it ends up being nobody's responsibility. So it's all very well to say that everybody should be doing it, but unless there is a policy, unless there is a dedicated budget, dedicated people, and recognize the work they do, you know, qualification, and one of the important factor that we try to make sure that we don't do any harm. Those of us in practicing in the field. So I think that is the one of the biggest purpose of what we are trying to, why we are trying to do this, have this conversation. And as I mentioned earlier, this might be just a beginning of more conversation of a different, a variety of issues that are of concern to all of us who are working in the field of health promotion. But if you're around me, I'd like to take you on a little tour of the Pacific, really just the Pacific Islands, and remind you of the things that many of you already know. But I think it will help put into perspective the region, the people, especially here. I talk mostly about the group that has been known, the Pacific people here in Aotearoa, and also in the Pacific. But I like to begin with a thought. And I think we should never forget that we actually have the power, and we have the choice to create our tomorrow yesterday. Of course, you know that today is the tomorrow you dreamt about yesterday. And I think that is a very health promotion kind of thinking, that we're always looking for opportunity to create something, but we need to believe that we do have the power and we do have the choice. A lot of things that we say to people, yeah, it's a matter of choice. But what choice have we got? In many cases, decisions are being made from somewhere, usually from top. And many of us and many of the people that we're working with really don't have any voice. Today, we are very fond of the United Nations thinking and sustainable development and nobody left behind. But what does that really mean? How does that really translate it into our everyday lives with the people that we're working with? So just a brief, and I have heaps of slides, but I'm just going to go right through very quickly here just to give you, and especially these are all things that you already know, already hear about, but just reminding you. And this session, you know, tell a little bit about the history and the politics of the Pacific, the diversity of Pacific geopolitical landscape is very interesting. And of course, the footprints of those colonial masters is still quite clearly, not just in the sand, but, you know, in the lives of people, you know, Aotearoa and also people in the Pacific. Okay, you know, there's the three things that I'm going to be covering if we have the time, but we'll quickly go through it. And just to remind us that, you know, it is really the diversity of the geopolitical landscape of the Pacific and of course of the world is very, very interesting here. And there was someone was writing that as the Mediterranean shaped the classical world and the Atlantic connected Europe to the New World, that is to America, the Pacific Ocean defines our tomorrow. And it's really, we are Aotearoa and the islands of the Pacific, we are in the middle of the center of the universe per se, in many things that is happening, especially in the geopolitical sphere. I like this map because this is interesting. And this is the world map at night. And the Pacific at the center, and you can say there is dark. There's absolutely nothing there. And this is usually the way people in the world thinking of the Pacific. It's just an empty space. It's the waste of time, waste of you have to have a very good reason to go there at a lot of cost. And so it always projects the idea and the thinking that it's just so unimportant. They're so small, they're no significance. So the perception was it's an empty ocean space, isolated small islands, undeveloped, economically poor, dependent on foreign aid. They are indigenous, unskilled population. But from us, we are the sea of islands. We are not the small islands. The ocean is us. We are the largest ocean, actually a third of the whole Earth's surface. And we hold more than 50% of the free water on Earth. And we hold and we look after, we are the custodian for the largest marine resources for the whole world. Moana is us, and we are Moana. And while many people might think of the ocean as something that divides us, to us, the ocean, Moana, is our mother, and that's what connects and sustains our lives. It's home to more than 11 million people living in 22 Pacific islands. And someone's constructed and calling us Polynesian, Melanesian, and Micronesians. And there's just some list of for your interest, and you have the opportunity to have these slides if you're interested in. But it's just sort of divided the three main ethnic grouping of the Pacific, the Polynesian being the largest group, and then Micronesian is a smaller group, but the Melanesians have the bigger population and bigger land mass and resources, natural resources, etc., etc. But they also have the bigger headaches and bigger issues compared to others. Something very interesting happened in 1904. You know, the shifting of power, the era of colonization. Japan defeated Russia. Europe was driven out of Asia-Pacific region, and China was awoken then. And the center of the political economic power has moved from Mediterranean to Atlantic, and now around the Pacific. This is something that you probably all know, and we won't dwell on it, but just to give you the colonial masters of the Pacific, you know, France, they still have New Caledonia and Wallis and Futuna and Tahiti as a colony. United States, of course, it has American Samoa, and Hawaii has now become a state. Guam is almost like a state, and then they have the Federated States of Micronesia, where you have Ponape and Kushrai and Chuk, and then you have the Northern Marianas and all the Palau, and a different way of association with United States. United Kingdom, they still have Pitcairn Island. United Kingdom used to have many more islands, you know, Fiji and the like, were under colony of Fiji, of United Kingdom. Of course, Australia still have Norfolk Island and New Zealand. Here, Cook and Niue and of course Tokelau, and the different arrangement of them. And then independence, you know, the different years where all these islands become independent. But just a summary of the sort of interest of the colonial masters in the Pacific Islands. The English were, it was a crown colony with governor representing the king, as it happened in Aotearoa and many of the other islands. But the main interest was on raw materials and plantation and missionaries to the islanders. That was the main focus of the English. German, again, was very much interested in trade, and they built, created many plantations in the different islands. The French were interested, of course, convicts. New Caledonia was a penal colony, much like Australia from the British. And then the church influence was a big deal. And also beginning the age of nuclear testing, and French were using some of the Pacific Islands, as you all know. And US, the same thing. US, the military and nuclear testing was the driving force, the main interest in the Pacific. And it was interesting, I used to work here for about 10 years with the Pacific community, SPC. But recognize here that at the end of World War II, the 6 colonial powers which created SPC, they wanted a way to secure the Western political and military interests post-war in the Pacific. Of course, they have done lots of good things. They have contributed tremendously to the development of the islands. But I think it was interesting to note the very initial thoughts behind all the good work they've been doing. And just most of the things have been carried out by SPC, one of the oldest regional organization before UN. It was started in 1947, etc., etc. But again, the colonial legacy, the things that they were interested in, nuclear testing was a big deal, and the big powers were using the islands for that. Of course, labor, indigent laborers, the story of Fiji and the continuous unrest now in Fiji between the Indians and the indigenous people of Fiji. Same thing happened in Samoa. A lot of Chinese were brought into Samoa. Indo-Fijian brought in by the British to work in the sugar plantation. Of course, they first brought in the Chinese, but the weather was too hot for them, so they changed. And when they brought the Indians, it was a much better people. They were able to they cope much better with the weather there. And land alienation from colonization. Solomon Islands, there's a lot of upheaval there with the Ramsey force, the Australian and New Zealand police force being there. And recently there has always been unrest there. Now we hear of the deal between the Solomon and the Chinese. So there's an ongoing remnants of what happened in the past. Bougainville in part of Solomon actually, but now owned as part of New Guinea, Papua New Guinea. But they still continue unrest between there. And you have all the freedom fighters here, much like how the Maori there in Aotearoa, and the Hawaiian and the Japanese, the Philippines in Hawaii, West Papua is another story. So those are still remnants of the colonial masters. What have I done here? There's too complicated a slide, but just to show you the different islands of the Pacific being used for the nuclear testing in 1945. And this has become up to today, a major focus and resources that's still being used from the islands. Tuna is a big thing. One of the Pacific Island has a very big, because of the old Pacific Ocean, a very big economic zone, especially Kilipas and all those other islands. And tuna is of interest. Sugarcane and copra was the gold mine in those days in the islands. and then you know, the different movements in the Pacific. And just touch a little bit here on colonization and health, and while new governing powers brought access to some of the new health technologies and understanding, they also brought new threats to health, exacerbated by the attitudes to indigenous communities. And I think this, unfortunately, still remains the same even of today. And here's some of the interesting thing, because I think the Western thinking, they think, you know, cash economy versus the barter system that the islands were using. But then the agriculture was so successful in growing crops that it's also turning to be a cash economy rather than growing what you need to eat. So in the Pacific, I say that we grow what we do not eat and we eat what we do not grow. We grow vegetables and we sell it, and then we go to KFC. Or it's the same way in the islands, you go and fish and you sell it, and you go buy turkey tail or whatever. So this continues to be a big issue, and it's partly because of colonization. It's still a remnant of that, you know, and globalization. Of course, the trade is one of the biggest challenge that we're facing in the Pacific. And there you are, same, just rewording those. So I think, you know, the ongoing discussion between lives and livelihood, trade and economies, it's just like, you know, a big thing, like Goliath and David fighting the power of trade. They control almost everything in the islands, and they think that it's part of civilization, part of progress to have all those food, which are mostly junk food. But this is really a big challenge. And, you know, you took the NCD and all those other issues in the islands, it made worse by, in the name of trade and progress and economic gain.
Can I
Yes.
just let you know that we no longer see your PowerPoint. I think it might be inadvertently you unshare, but yeah, you might need just to, because we cannot see your PowerPoint any longer. You might want to either you
reshare again.
Reshare, or work out a way of perhaps recapping, or
My apology for that one. Is the PowerPoint on the screen again?
Yes, thanks.
Yeah, I think you probably, which is continue another slide. I'll just quickly go through it, and it just mentioned that this is one of the things here that Australia and New Zealand are excited of is the trade agreements. But I can say,
if you put it to slide show mode, please.
Is it better?
That's great.
Okay, great. Yeah, but I say that most of these trade agreements is for the benefits of those other countries, not the Pacific. That's all I need to say at this point. And you have the like of base plus and all the stuff, you know. I think this is a whole presentation on its own, so I won't go in there. But I just want to mention these are all echo of colonization and what the dominant way of thinking and how the colonizers are still treating the people in the Pacific, unfortunately. And this is something that was very interesting with the turkey tail, you know, the WHO, the World Trade Organization told Samoa, you cannot do that. It's discrimination to have this, they banned turkey tail. And then the Samoan Prime Minister said, no, we don't ban the importation of turkey tail. We just wanted to come in attached to a turkey. So they wanted the whole bird. and then you can have your techie tale there. Anyway, they lost the fight and they had to rethink their proposition to become a member of WTO. The same reason for mutton flap. Fiji got away from it. They were able to accept the whole carcass of so you can have leg of lamb and other parts, not just the yummy fatty piece of mutton flap. So I just quickly remind you of this, and this will be coming to the end of this presentation, you know, who the Pacific people are. And these are the different words that is being described the Pacific people. Moana Nui Akiwa, of course, and they are, you hear the word Pacifica, usually used in the education department. The health department prefer Pacific people. But I think what is important that each of these ethnic groups has its own distinct culture, language, protocols, and unique cultural context. And that seems to be forgotten sometimes. They just think of a person and not really understanding what else it means. And it's just to remind you something that actually Sione tucked it up somewhere to remind that even though we have a blood relation with Maori, the Pacific people, because they are Polynesian, but there was a specific reference for the relationship between the Crown and the Pacific people, as shown in this document. Migration of people from Aotearoa, there's a whole chapter that we can talk about, but just to note that, you know, beginning in the 50s. And, you know, Pacific people were here because there was a need for them to work in factories. But now I think it's worthwhile to note the Pacific people are here to stay. And you probably in the very near future, and already, you know, Pacific people are cleaners, they are working in your garden, but they also your doctors and lawyers, and who knows, might be a prime minister someday. So just to remind everyone, New Zealand is a Pacific country, it's not the other way around. And I think Winston Peters said it very nicely. We are linked by history, culture, politics, and demographics. As part of Pacific family, New Zealand is conscious that our identity, our national security, our prosperity are intricately linked. We have, in a very genuine sense, a shared Pacific destiny. We won't go in there, but colonialism had done little to develop or educate those people, but we are so thrilled that finally there was a recognition of these very dark ages with regard to Pacific people in New Zealand. This is just a thought, and I think it's very true. A lot of things that you don't see, but underneath, which Pacific people are just like all of us, Maori and everyone else. We have the same desire to be recognized and to contribute and to be contribute by active part of the community where we are. You have this, and you can also look it up, but this is very, very interesting. It's growing. A number of people who are born here in New Zealand now outnumbered than we used to be. People just come off the boat, fresh off the boat, but now majority of the people, Pacific people, are now born here, and they are actually New Zealanders, citizens themselves. And then you have all this detail about it. You know, the largest groups are Samoan, Tongan, Fijian, and Tuvaluan, and it's growing. Christianity, religion is very important. More Pacific people are Christians, 7 out of 10. And that is something of significance because spirituality is something very dear to many of the Pacific people. Again, we are 4th largest of the population, but I think it's growing. It's going to be more Pacific. But as I said, you will likely in your lifetime run into some people there from the Pacific. And that is just trying to quickly give you a sense about the Pacific at large, but especially Pacific people here in Aotearoa. I do teach a whole course on this subject with Otago University, and this is some of the material that I'm using there. But I hope and I think it helps us, the members of Health Promotion Forum, to have some idea or to be reminded of who are the Pacific people among our midst here in Aotearoa. So and everyone, I think I'll stop there. And I'll be happy to answer any question, or of course, we'll have other conversation and other presentation where we can go into much deeper discussion with this. Malo apito.
Thank you,
Malo,
Viliami.
Viliami. Go ahead, Miranda.
Oh, no, I just, there weren't many questions that came through, but one come through wanting to be anonymous. Oh, hang on, I'll just go to my chat. And it was, how has health promotion as a discipline developed in the islands from what you've seen, Viliami?
Mariana, can you say that again, please?
Yep. So the question was, how has health promotion as a discipline developed in the islands?
I can say, by and large, it's still very undeveloped. And I think this is one of the things that we hope with Sione and with all of your support, the members of Health Promotion, we can enrich or reach out through the platform of Health Promotion to include the development of health promotion in the islands. They do not have accreditation. They just like us, they don't have a clear pathway. And I think this is one of the vision that we have. If through the approval and the blessing of all of you, the members, we can extend this work to include the islands.
Thank you, Viliami. That's it for questions for you. There's only one more for Sione. So for you, Sione, the question was, how do the members become accredited, and when is that process likely to be rolled out?
That's a very good question. It leads us to the final part of our conversation today. There is a criteria from IUHPE. Firstly, the accreditation is given usually to those who have got a bachelor in health promotion, or if it's in a degree from other field, you need to demonstrate that you have practice for a particular period. Off the top of my head, I think it's 3 years. The full information is available. We will give you the link when we send you the video, so you'll have time to read through. There's also a grace period of up to 5 years that can be offered from day one of launching our Aotearoa system. That will allow people who have been practicing but have not got any formal qualifications to be assessed and ascertain their competencies. As you might sense already, it's a practice-led assessment approach. Although there's a standard, there's a minimum requirement set. We will have ongoing conversations with IHBE to give more latitude to accommodate our situation in here in Aotearoa. And so there's room for everyone to join the accreditation. So the system we plan to be up and running in 2 years' time. The first year, the first 6 months is from, The first 12 months, as from July, is to finalize policies and processes and establishing the structure. There will be a management committee. They will, to oversee everything. There will be subcommittees. The two main subcommittees will be an assessment committee and also a complaints committee. There will be assessors trained to go through the process. They will be trained by a team of IUHPE and in consultation with us. So time frame, 2 years time, that's what we are looking at. We're having a conversation with the Ministry of Health to consider this development as significant, not just to health promotion, but part of building the workforce across the health sector, given the reform that is ongoing, as I mentioned before.
Thank you. I've got another one come in anonymously while you were talking, and it's does Te Tiriti feature in the accreditation framework processes or framework?
Yes, I touched on that briefly before. There is the global framework of IHPE. We are admitted into that in this process of approving us to become a national accreditation organization. That is, HPF is the National Accreditation Organization. So it will be an arm of HPF. Our board will be the overseeing the governing board. In the management committee, we will call for nominations of interest. We will spell out the criteria. It will be a combination of academic and practice, but also more importantly, expertise in Mātauranga Māori, specifically for the field of health promotion. As you know, health promotion, Māori health promotion has been well developed to a great extent. There is not only Te Pāmahutonga, same as Anduri, but also Whakaruru Hau. That's not the full title, but it's part of the title. The work by Dr. Mihi Ratima. And in our first ever textbook on health promotion, based on our Aotearoa experience, I think it's the third chapter. That's Māori health promotion, co-authored by Sam Mason and Mihi and others. So the pathway has been defined very clearly. And so the combination of expertise on the management committee and other parts of the structure must make sure that it reflects what we are looking for. Does that answer the question, Mariana?
Yeah, I think so.
Sorry, if I may add on there, Mariana, sorry. In our discussion in the last presentation for the most recent IUHB conference, in discussing this, of course, that was the uniqueness of our accreditation proposal from Aotearoa, is the inclusion of the Te Tiriti, not just the Ottawa Charter and all that health promotion stuff. But also, I did mention there and suggested that we also look into incorporating some of the Pacific cultural perspective together with the Te Tiriti, because as I have just outlined in my presentation today, the significance of and the contribution of the other Pacific cultural groups that are currently live not just here in Aotearoa, but also in the rest of the world. Malo.
Yeah, thank you for that, Viriam. The accreditation framework has got 3 components. The first one, some of you might recall, we developed the health promotion competencies Aotearoa. The new version, not the 2000 original competencies. And within that, Viriami, there is a strong reference to the special relationship of Pacific peoples to the Crown. You refer to that 2000 report on that the Ministry of Justice put forward of the special relationship. And in addition, also to that, the cultural affinity and the strong kinship ties between Tangata Moana Nui Kiwa and Tangata Whenua. We know the history, and you outlined it very clearly, your background presentation. And yes, we will configure that in a number of ways, which you always do when you develop a curriculum or an assessment tool. And there are a number of ways of doing that. Of course, our management committee and assessment and complaints committee will see to it that it's done properly. But what I'm saying is that the structure, the foundation has been laid to ensure that it reflects, our reality here in New Zealand, and universal goals that we have along the rest of the world, especially with the imperative of our charter, but at the same time, our unique reality here in Aotearoa. And as I mentioned earlier, the Health Promotion World community is watching what we are doing here. In fact, the Global Accreditation Organization, this is the unit within IHPE that looks after the whole accreditation system, and I'm a member of that. They are very encouraged by this development because they can learn from that. In fact, they've asked us if they can draw lessons from there and see how they can develop a similar framework for other indigenous nations like Canada, America. Australia has got approved as a national accreditation organization. However, it does not include indigenous knowledge, and our colleagues there are keen to learn from what we are doing. So challenging, but it's another contribution from us to our ongoing development of health promotion across the world. And on that point, what you mentioned also, Williami, we have had conversations with our Pacific health promoters. They are keen to see whether our Aotearoa experience can help them in the development. So we are contributing the world and come back to our region as well.
And another aspect, of course, we did discuss is the fact that this is also an opportunity to be recognized transnationally or internationally. When there's somebody is accredited here in Aotearoa, will be recognized in Australia, in England, and Europe, wherever they may happen to go. As we all appreciate that we are all citizens of the world, and people do move around. And I think this is also a point that we discussed in our last discussions, of course, the enabling to be recognized wherever you are with this kind of accreditation and qualification. Yeah.
Thank you for that, William.
We've got one last question. Do we have time for the last question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So it's from Chrissy, and the question is, it's in regard to timeframes. I think this is when you were talking about 2 years that it should roll out. And the question was, is that the same time frame for providers wanting to accredit courses?
A good question, and that was what I was going to touch on next. So that's a good lead in. The accreditation that is developed by national accreditation organizations such as us, Health Promotion Forum, is for the practitioners. It's for the health promoters. They are registered nationally, but also they can be included nationally, and they are accredited, therefore, under the IHPE framework. The providers, that's a different pathway. But again, they need to work closely with the same accreditation framework that we are using for providers. Providers like universities, polytechs, and Wananga, they go directly to the global accreditation organization for their accreditation. But as I said, they consult the framework used for the providers, so that the two pathways are in congruence.
Shone, sorry, I'm disturbing you, but I have got to run. There's something else happening here, and to everybody, thank you very much. And we'll continue this conversation. Sione and Mariana will round up. Malo Pito, I got to run for something else. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, Mariami.
Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you very much for your contribution.
Right.
Yeah. So two distinct pathways, but it's all part of the system. Again, we will post the link to the details of that when we give you a copy of the video. And feel free to ask questions. When, as Mariami said, that we see this as an ongoing conversation, maybe on a bi-monthly or quarterly basis. We will have an ongoing conversation because we see this as a significant development, for our profession in Aotearoa in New Zealand. Any other questions, Mariana? Well, we need to wrap up. I'm conscious of
no questions.
Yeah. Okay. So just to sum up our so Emma has just put a set of evaluation questions there. What went well for you? How can we improve? Please do answer them. Often Emma will put that on the chat, but also follow you up to your email. And thank you for doing that. So just to sum up, it has been a collective journey to enhance the efficacy of our profession. We know that it's a bit vulnerable because we do not have a clear set of standards and no framework to give formal recognition. And we know there are many challenges associated with that reality. And developing this accreditation framework is to address some of those issues. And also, as Viriami said, we can, in the future, that's the plan of IHBE, we can travel across the world to other countries that are registered under the same framework. And in theory, at this point, you can be employed there, recognized immediately, just like other professions that are registered or they have got accreditation processes in place. A teacher, doctor, nurse, and all of that. So that is the aim. For people who come to Aotearoa, of course, they have their global registration, but because they do not have the unique Te Tiriti component, it will be provisional and they work under supervision. That's the guideline that we have drafted in place. Again, it will be finalized and you will be consulted about it. But that's the process, just to make sure everyone is welcome, but make sure that you have the full competencies to serve our communities here. So the whole aim is to not only to look after our ongoing professional need, but to enable us to travel across borders and serve humanity and vice versa as we learn in the whole process. So your team, we here at HPF, we have worked hard, but we have you in mind. It's a collective journey. And in a number of ways, as I described, we made into the house, we contributed to the Geneva Charter, we helped to shape the strategy of IHBE, and we have the honor of now leading IHBE for a little while and continue to embed and advance what we do. Using the analogy of the whare tapawha, we are in the house. We used to be outside the house, and we always feel uncomfortable with that. We are in the whare, and we are building a whare that will give a space for all of us and we put together our collective knowledge for our benefits and the well-being of humanity. And if I may put on my hat as the president of IHBE, IHBE really welcomes the contribution from Aotearoa. In fact, Aotearoa is making a significant contribution despite its size and its small population. So small is not only beautiful, small is significant. And well done, everyone. Please continue to work together with us, use the information that we share, tell us what we need to improve and how can we work together. So the next 2 years will be a challenging, but it should be a very rewarding journey for all of us. Kia ora, mahalo apito, and thank you.